In the last century, the Irish emigrants who lived in London, and New York, Chicago and Birmingham could rest assured that even though time was passing, the country at home remained the same. Surely, an exile could someday return and look at the old farm, the old village, the landscape of their youth. And yes, truly that was the case, because Ireland was one of the last countries in the Western world to enter into what we call globalization. But inevitably, it arrived. And for the last decade, the rural shape of our country has been changing beyond recognition. As Ireland goes, so goes the village. And Lusk is in the midst of a very rapid and permanent change. Call it progress if you like, but nonetheless, it's sad to think that nothing will be the same again. A generation ago, in this village, Lusk people lived. Now we have several nationalities, every county of Ireland is represented, and that's not a bad thing by any means. But on the other hand, it's sad to think that old places, old names will change. So we in the Lusk Heritage Group decided that we'd show you Lusk today. Yesterday was different, so will tomorrow be.
Through time, landers in fields and farms adapts to many changes. Man learned to use the good earth from a way back. The cultivation of grasses, then other crops and animal husbandry, all provided the food which settled and stabilized the early concentrations of people. The rich fertility of the land in Fingal is evident to anyone who has flown into Dublin Airport on a clear day. The first skins of soil were removed to facilitate the foundations of the development beginnings on the east side of the Skerries Road in late 2001. This land was owned by the Sweetman and Harford families for many years. Sheep and cattle have been reared here. The milking cow and the humble donkey have had a presence. The vegetable and horticultural produce of glasshouses has also dignified the land. One field was used as a pitch and putt course for a number of years. The trials and delights of the golf game began here for many people. The picture will continuously change until this development is concluded.
Away down the hill from the Skerries Road development, the townland of Raheny is waiting for tar and cement, as the song says. The new Lusk Ring Road will sweep this way towards a new roundabout on the Rush Road, with houses all the way. Through this roundabout we have the site of the Remount Farm. Irish horses were broken here for the British Army to provide material for the cavalry charges of the 19th century. From Waterloo to the Crimea, Irish horses were there, trained in Lusk as well, I might as well tell you. One whole field was covered with sand to ease the hooves and provide soft landings for jockeys. The farm was long before its time. It had piped water in every yard and field. Out through McGuigan's quarry field we head for the Dublin Road. No longer will we see neat stacks of bales or curious cattle gazing over the hedge.
We are now at the new development on the Dublin Road. This development will bring in some magnificent fields of the Chapel Farm, owned by the Taylor family. The Taylor fields have had football and hurling played on them, also wrestling bouts. Rabbits have been snared for stew. Pheasants have been caught for the delicate palate, with mushrooms for flavour. Crab apples and blackberries were the afters. The daisy, the buttercup, the cowslip, the bluebell, and others were all admired in turn. The unprofitably gay firs disappeared with modern farming change. The waving fields of corn are well remembered, as is the excitement and bustle of the threshing mill days in the farmyard. The fine cattle and horses, the buck goat and the noble ploughmen, Hugh and Joe Devine, are to fade in the cement of progress. We're still here on the Dublin Road, and behind me is this beautiful bungalow, which sadly is to be demolished for a new building development. And in front of me you'll see the new roadway which will be connecting up Chapel Farm and Dunema development.
Kilhedge Lane is in the southwest corner of the village. The Fulham brothers founded a dairy herd here over 30 years ago. With hard work and good planning, it became one of the foremost Frisian herds in the country. Farmers came from near and far to buy their animals when the enterprise was wound up to make way for the Dun-Emer development. Don't forget that this title remembers Emer Monarch, the bride of Cuchulainn, over 2,000 years ago. Right now we're in downtown Lusk. This is the square, the busiest part of this little village. The building behind me is being removed in the very near future, in line with Ireland's new policy of village and urban renewal. What's replacing it is a very sympathetic development, residential, shopping and entertainment, and I think it'll suit perfectly in the middle of this spot. Behind me is St. Macalin's Church. This is the oldest site in Lusk. It was a site for pagan worship, Christian worship, and this particular church was decommissioned in the early part of the 20th century. Since then it has housed a snooker hall, a Boy Scouts hall and the Willie Monks Museum. At this point though, Fingal County Council are going to pump some serious money in here, and hopefully when it's complete this is going to house some very worthwhile project. Here we are at Post Office Road, one of our new street signs provided by Fingal County Council. A little bit Irish, I'm afraid, because the post office was located on Post Office Road, but now it has moved out to Main Street. Nonetheless, it looks very attractive, certainly when you see it surrounded by the flowers so carefully provided by the Tidy Towns group. Before this, of course, we didn't really need street signs because everyone knew where they were anyway. But if you're from somewhere between Athlone and Zagreb, you're going to need a certain amount of signage. We're still in Post Office Road. These buildings here are very much part of old Lusk, but as they say, time moves along. These buildings will move along as well. I trust that a very nice and exciting village centre development will take their place. Behind me here is the new community care centre for Lusk. It represents a very welcome change in care of the elderly and the infirm, meaning that people from the area are cared for within their own area by their own people.
There was a time not long ago when people stopped and stood and talked and lifted cap to ringing bells and bid you fortune on your way, when streets were dark and times were hard and nature's way was understood, and Sunday was a day for prayer, a day to rest, a day to share a yarn or two. There was a time not long ago when fortune was a healthy child, a horse and cart, a field of hay, a letter from America, when sense of time and place and worth were values of a simpler way, which brought contentment out of toil, enriching all who felt the pain of life. There was a time not long ago when life was lived in black and white, dark was night and light was day, no in-between, no shades of grey, nor shadow on a man's esteem or mad confusion in his head, no rush, no fuss, but pleasant day of honest work for precious pay, then rest and play. There was a time not long ago when everybody knew my name, and I knew theirs and what they did, and whence they came, and where they stood. While much has changed, our village still is cherished by both old and new, and in our time in every way is just the place it was that day, not long ago. The land which changes with seasonal regularity and man's use is set for another consideration around Lusk. Man and beast pass on, nature regenerates. Jack Yates said that death is change in a world where change is the law of existence. For Lusk, the tide of change, and the earth is again turning.
Hello, the Green in Lusk, 2003. Nothing much has changed here in the recent past. On my left is St. Maculin's, behind me is Paddy Weston the potter, the flowers, the green itself. An island of peace, you might say. But off the street in this particular village, there's been an awful lot of activity taking place over the last 12 months.
From the lofty tower top, lines of new houses and roads are the new view. The green sheen of flowing meadows are no more. The stream between Taylor's two fields on the Dublin Road has gone underground. Whatever the extent of new buildings, the towers will remain the centre point of the village. New people in new places will have new meanings for the population. As we look down, things are looking up for Lusk.
When I said on the green that nothing had changed, the contrast is to be found out here. This is what has been happening over the last 12 months in Lusk. A completely new development, a completely new village within the village. This is one of the most tasteful developments that I've seen anywhere. An awful lot of thought has gone into the development of this estate. The diversity of the housing is what makes it more than attractive. You have the series of squares and small roads opening one off the other. And the names that have been brought into it are more than familiar to us. We have Belfry Place, Forge Lane, and then after the trades that lived in the areas, with Huntsman's Road, Weaver's Crescent, then the ever-present Black Raven Pipe Band, which is one of Lusk's greatest claims to fame, is remembered here in that we have Piper's Lane, we have Black Raven Court. These are the things that give continuity in an area.
Last year in Dublin there were riots actually in the street from people calling themselves Reclaim the Streets. But this year in Carduff we reclaimed our road without a shot ever being fired, because when the M1 opened it took us back from the abyss, it took us back from crowded roads and car fumes and gave us back our street, our road, and we're very, very happy that it's done that. Carduff actually has always been an integral part of Lusk, but in many ways it's always been a little bit apart. It's always stayed apart. We've had teams of footballers which were Carduff men, not Lusk men. We've had teams of hurlers and we could challenge the Lusk men. And it would seem now that we're destined to remain separate from Lusk in many ways. Because I think from what I can see, Lusk is developing, exploding almost at such a pace. But the word on the street is they're not going to extend the sewerage out here to Carduff. They say it'll cost too much because we haven't enough people. So oddly enough, what it's going to do for us is improve our standard of living, because we're going to miss the explosion and we're going to be able to have more time now to enjoy Carduff. We can enjoy our streets here, we can enjoy our garden, we can enjoy the fact that in many ways we can go up to the M1 now, we can use it because we want it, it's the best thing that ever happened to us. But then we can come back here and we can have it when we want it and we can leave it when we want to as well. So as I say, look around here, the garden, the countryside, it was creeping away from us, and I think the M1 has given it back to us at this stage. Everything is changing. Farming is changing the same way as the roads are changing. This old machine here, this old hay rake, 100 years ago it was pulled by a horse around this very field. Now look at it, it's a garden ornament. That's change, a serious change. 50 years ago, or at least 45 years ago, I was sitting at these very desks. They were in Carduff National School, which is just across the road there. Now they're thrown out and all they're doing is holding up flower pots for me. They're in bad need of a bit of sanding and a bit of varnishing, but I'm hoping that I'll get that done before the end of the summer. The school itself is still thriving over there. It's the same school, as I say, that in 1916 Thomas Ashe taught in. I prefer to think of it in a way as the school where my kids went to school, and nowadays there's a whole new generation starting all over again, and the new road and the quietness of the place now is going to make it a lovely place to go to school. And you know, 30 years ago this pump here was firmly mounted on the wall of my parents' house, and I well remember that it took about 150 strokes, and they were arm-wrenching strokes, to try and fill the water tank every day. Now the water is here, the pump is just another garden ornament, and again it's progress, but I think it's a beautiful old item, but it's progress of a good kind as well. I don't really miss the 150 strokes pumping it. There's other things in this garden here of mine which in a way remind me of progress of a different kind, progress which isn't always for the good. That unassuming piece of precast concrete there, that was once part of Kinure House in Rush. It was pulled out of the rubble when they were knocking it down back in, was it 1987? I think it was in around then. Kinure actually was sold back in 1963 for £70,000. There was 300 acres and a massive house attached to it. The year afterwards, the contents of Kinure House were sold for 250,000. But sadly, when it was taken over eventually by Dublin County Council, they had Ardgillan, they had Malahide, they had a lot of other places, and Kinure was let lie there, and eventually it went into disrepair, and nowadays it's no longer there. And that was not progress of a good kind. It was sad. I can also look at, there's another stone there, even less attractive looking stone. It looks like nothing in particular, but that came from Turvey House just up the road here. Turvey House was quietly knocked down in the middle of the night in around 1968, I think. I'm not quite sure of the year, but it was knocked down so that planners could make way for a golf course, and all that's left now of Turvey House, besides this little stone which I kept, all that's left is a pile of rubble and quite a nice golf course. So for some it was progress, but for others it wasn't.
One of the most welcome signs to be seen along the roads these days is the sign announcing the new Lusk Relief Road. That is going to make the difference to the villagers, new and old, in this particular town. It will give the streets back to us.
So must be coming down there then and going around that way.
Last year this ring road was just an idea, it was a concept. Now it's starting to become a reality. When we see stone down, when we see the rollers moving, we know the ring road is definitely coming. And please roll on, ring road. This is the oldest of the approach roads into Lusk. It looks very quiet at this stage, but once upon a time it was the road that led to the capital. And I'm not talking about Dublin either, I'm talking about Tara of the High Kings. It must at that stage have been a busy enough road, but now it's more or less the poor relation of roads around these parts. It's quiet. It's a sleepy road. But I think we're going to get some development along here as well. Some of the old homesteads that are here will naturally have to go, but what replaces them, I'm sure, will really be something to embellish the village.
Lusk inhabitants will have been intrigued by the recent activities on the hill alongside Rahenny Road. Throughout the winter months, a team of archaeologists have been employed in examining evidence of human activity in Lusk dating back over 5,000 years to the time of the Neolithic or New Stone Age. Until recently, many historians believe that the history of this area only reached back 2,000 years to the time of Fergal Monarch, the local chieftain whose daughter became the bride of Cuchulainn. The remains of two separate periods of settlement were found on the hill. The earliest evidence found dated to the Neolithic period. This was a small pit containing a single hollow scraper. A number of Bronze Age ditches were found and a flint scraper were recovered from one of them and pottery from two others. A series of cremation pits were also excavated and contained burnt human bones, fragments of pottery, flint and a single hammerstone which was covered in small dents. Circular ditches were found dating from the early Christian era. There was an area nearby covered with cobblestones which was probably part of a farmstead. Corn drying kilns were also found here. Other finds included fragments of pottery imported from France and a small copper alloy brooch used for fastening cloaks and a badly corroded knife. These finds dated from the time of St. Maculan, the patron of Lusk. A number of cooking places where meat was boiled in pits containing water and heated stones were found on the low marshy area of Racecourse Common. The identification of these sites and features significantly add to the understanding of Lusk's later prehistoric and early Christian landscape. This strengthens the picture that settlement in the Lusk area substantially predates the monastic foundation of the 5th century AD. We would like to take this opportunity to thank Mr. Stephen Johnson, archaeologist, Simon Walsh and Kevin Thorpe for all the help they have given to us in this project.
Carduff still has the relics of old decency. We've got still quite a lot of thatched cottages here in Carduff. Across there we've got Joe Finnegan's, and just up a little bit then there's Kiley's, and if you go a little bit further down you'll find Mrs. Carton's house, which is only after being sold. And I wonder, now it's changed hands, poor Mrs. Carton has moved on, I wonder what's going to happen to it. Is it going to stay and be part of the scenery for a long time to come, or will it finish up looking like Kelly's, which is at this stage has weeds growing on the top of it? This is progress, I suppose. For some people it means one thing, for other people it means something else. For most of my neighbours, and certainly for me, the opening of the M1 is the best thing that ever happened in Carduff. But I suppose if I was a garage owner, or if I owned a little shop, or if I was Jerry Murtagh down in the pub, then maybe it wouldn't be progress of the right kind for me, because progress, it doesn't lift all boats. Hopefully it lifts most boats, and I'm hoping that Carduff will be a happier place to live at least. I have an interesting document here about Belaley Dump, Belaley landfill. It's called Restoration and Aftercare Plan, and the date of it is July 2003. And basically it talks about not so much what Belaley is, but what Belaley hopefully will be in the future. Because Belaley Dump has for many years been a contentious issue in the whole parish of Lusk here. Back in 1971 it was opened. Before that, I can remember it was an unofficial dump. It's where I used to go with all my loads of rotten tomatoes and rubbish and everything else, and so did every other farmer in the area. And occasionally the council had to come out with a digger and push it all into a heap. Then they opened it, they made it official, and to be quite honest, it was a little bit like the troops coming to the north in 1968. They were welcomed with open arms. The same thing with Belaley. We had a place that we could go, that we could officially get rid of all the stuff we wanted to get rid of, and Belaley was a boon to the area. It's still, I suppose, a boon, but over the years, as it started to creep up higher and higher and higher, people said, when is it going to stop? When are they going to let somebody else take a bit of the rubbish of the Dublin area? And as you can see now, what has happened in Belaley is that we've got a new mountain in North County Dublin, a mountain that was never there before. They say that in September of last year, the mountain of Belaley had risen to 40 metres. The official thing, according to the plan, is that they're going to allow it to rise to 42 metres. That's going to settle down to 40 metres, and they're going to make the contours set into the whole part of this area here in Rogerstown. So you can't really do anything about Belaley now except hope that it finishes sooner rather than later, but that when it does finish, that it will be given back to the people, it will be reclaimed, and it will actually be an amenity area. The actual plan here lists down the objectives. They sound quite laudable actually. The objectives are to create an amenity area for use by the general public, to establish an environmentally safe area, to protect the surrounding environment, to integrate the site with the surrounding landscape, and to enhance and improve the local area and the Rogerstown estuary. So hopefully I'm not sure when, we'll be able to have little walks across here and guided tours. And this area, which for so long has been a dump, may sooner or later turn into a tourist attraction.
So where have we arrived at now? We're just a mile or two outside Lusk at this stage. And a few short years ago, the housing estates we were in looked something like this. You had farming going on along those lines, livestock, crop production, everything like that. Now, because, I suppose, of the European Union, things have changed to a great extent. Farming has changed worldwide. Certainly Ireland and Lusk are going to be no exception. Development is coming at us whether we like it or not. It's important that we have an input into ensuring that the development is tasteful, is above board, is fit to live with. Because when we're leaving something like this behind, saying goodbye to things like this, we want to be sure that we can bear to live with what's coming next.
In these times of great change, the elegant mobility of olden times is still practiced by Tommy Dennis with his pony and trap. At his leisurely pace, he can observe in comfort and be much admired by many. This finished piece of bronze sculpture, organised by the Lusk Tidy Towns Committee, symbolises the coming together of the old and the new, and provokes a sense of unity and welcome. Clasped hands flow into a torque-like shape, representing our Celtic past, combining with a modern welcome. The verse on the base of the stone, and written by artist, historian Brendan Scally, encompasses in a few words the history of Lusk, its culture, its past, its present and its future. Lusker, this ancient place, cradled a message. Sounds of distant bells raise echoes, new bells clamour. Listen to the old, let friendship flourish.
It's been 2 years since we first came out here with our camera to record the progress of Lusk from village to town. I mightn't have improved much in the meantime, but there's certainly very serious improvement on view here.
The previous videos caught the foundation of the 4 new roundabouts. The finished constructions are impressive to look at and useful in operation.
This roundabout on the Rathmore is the Lusk bypass. This is the Dublin Road roundabout, and it will greet visitors to Lusk as they emerge from the Dublin Road. This cycleway, this walkway around the Lusk bypass is unique in County Dublin. It shows the benefit of planning and forward thinking as you develop a small village. It's falling into shape at the moment, beautifully landscaped, trees, and keeps the traffic out of the centre of the village.
The elevated observation from the top of the tower gathers the nature and extent of major structural change which has occurred in Lusk village in the last few years. The changes to date, however significant, reflect only partly in the proposed plans for our place in the next decade. The benefits of progress are apparent, the downside is less evident. The returned exiles would find it difficult to recognize the old place.
Here we are, finished product. What do you think? Isn't good taste and good sense prevailing here? What we can see is a typical village street scene. Nothing of close or intense development to be seen about it. This is Chapel Farm. 5 years ago, potatoes were growing right here where I'm standing now. It's a modern, a bright, a spacious housing estate. It's typical, in fact, of the type of estate that is growing up in Lusk. The gaps in the map will be filled in within the ring roads, and by the time that the programme is complete, we should have up to 7 integrated estates complete with our parkland around the village.
This is the first development to touch Orland Park area. A first for Lusk of 3- and 2-storey apartments, complete with townhouses, beautifully designed with courtyard and all in the shadows of the Lusk Towers. Archaeological investigations here at Glenree developments have exposed remains of medieval Lusk. Waste pits, drainage ditches and property boundaries, probably dating from the 13th to the 14th century AD, were found at the north end of the development, closest to the centre of the medieval town. These features were probably originally located in the rear gardens of medieval houses on the outskirts of 13th century Lusk. A unique feature in the scheme of things is the location of a typical thatch cottage, of which Lusk had many in past times. In front of me is the new roadway to connect the large developments of Chapel Farm and Dunema estates.
And here we are back at the square, downtown Lusk. On the surface, not much has changed. Traffic has got much scarcer on it, and it will get scarcer still because ramps are going in, as a surprise, surprise, for the drivers that continue to go through the village. But right here, permission has been granted for a new and exciting development which will incorporate a health centre, a pharmacy, various retail outlets and some very upmarket apartments. When you go shopping in Lusk in the near future, you're going to find a nice little supermarket here. In addition to that, if your appetite gets the better of you, there's going to be a nice little bistro here, which is a first for Lusk. Don't forget, of course, you can always go downtown to Murray's, the best of food during the day as well. It's just a bit Mediterranean here outside Conrad Murray's Top Shop. When the sun shines, Lusk is a lovely little spot. Just across the road from me is another little cottage which is sadly zoned to go, but it is going to be replaced by a nice little development of residential houses in the shadow of the tower. Tidy little spot here as well, isn't it? With all the hanging baskets, all the decorations. That's something that happened because of the Tidy Towns Committee. The Tidy Towns Committee is operating strongly here for the last 18 or 20 years under the guidance of Pat Kelly. It does work whether they're afraid of her or they do it for good reasons. It still has the end result. The Tidy Towns Committee has spent a lot of money, a lot of time, and for the future, the first thing people will see on their way from Dublin is the welcoming sign of the new bronze raven on the Dublin Road roundabout as you enter Lusk.
Well, here we are in the green in Lusk, the pivotal centre of the old village. The new developments and housing estates of Lusk fan out from here, but this is where it all began. The unusual bandstand in front of the church was very important because of the existence of the Black Raven Pipe Band, who were started by Thomas Ashe. The Catholic Church, which is the pivot of the pivot, originally built in 1809 and it was rebuilt in 1922. It's an extremely fine building. The old school, which dates back as far as 1874, it was replaced obviously by the new school here in Lusk, and it's been home to Black Raven Pipe Band for many years now. The Carnegie Library goes back as far as 1908, when the Carnegie Trust was building libraries all around the country. Nowadays it's home to a judo club and it's been an important part of the parish for years. Paddy Weston's house, which is well known for its pottery, but not so well known for the fact that it was once a parish house and the priest of the parish lived in it. The old pump, relic of old decency, which is still surviving, but it's more decorative than functional at this stage. Lusk House here was another important house of the same era. It housed doctors down through the years, from Dr. Brennan to Dr. Cusick to Dr. Cooney. Another doctor who was very important was Dr. Richard Hayes, who was originally commander of the Fingal IRA in 1916, before he handed over the position to Thomas Ashe. At the time Ashe lived here, this was the schoolhouse which was supplied to all the teachers as they came into the area, and Ashe of course taught just across the wall in Carduff National School. He fought in 1916 along with Hayes, but Ashe died in 1917 on hunger strike. The house continued on as a schoolhouse, as a teacher's house for many years, but eventually it was sold into private hands in around 1970.
During these three films, we've been trying to give a contemporary look at the change Lusk is making from village to town. And it's been easy, of course, with the modern technology at our disposal. But even in the past, people gained their own impressions and wrote them down. And not the least of these people is Sir Reginald Barnwell, who currently lives in Queensland, Australia. Sir Reginald is a direct descendant of the de Barnevall family, who lived in Turvey House, quite close to us. Sir Reginald was so enthusiastic about the whole concept that he sent us a magnificently written text detailing the history of the family in Lusk. Particularly, of course, his distant ancestor, Sir Christopher Barnwell, whose monument we see today. Sir Christopher and his wife resided in Turvey House near Donabate. The house was built, Sir Reginald tells us, with stone recovered from the ruins of Gracediew Convent. The Barnwell family dominated the medieval history of Fingal and East County Meath. They had branches in Crickstown, County Meath, Kilbrew House. They also owned the castle at Brimore near Balbriggan, and this castle is being meticulously restored even as we speak. Sir Reginald ends his text with a very apt quotation from the writings of Lord Macaulay, and it makes us feel particularly good doing this little piece. It goes, "People who take no pride in the noble achievements of remote ancestors will never achieve anything worthy to be remembered with pride by remote descendants." Do you know, Ray, when you're young you think you're going to live forever, but as you grow older you realise that you won't. And the only way that a little bit of immortality can be had is through family, through descent, through generations of living in the same place. I have found recently that I tend to look back as well as forward. I'm looking back at 7 generations here in the Nevet. I'm looking back at my own father, who's dead since 1967, His brother Willie, who was born and reared in this house, Willie was born in 1897, more than 100 years ago. He was an eminent historian, in fact, and a historian before it was fashionable to be an historian. Back a generation further, my grandfather, James Monks, who was also born in this house, his brother William, his other brother Pat, they founded a bakery in North King Street in Dublin. In that bakery, or just outside it, Kevin Barry was arrested by British forces back during the Tan War. A generation further back again, another William Monks, married 3 times, left us related to everybody in the area. And so on back into the past, back to Richard Monks and Robert Monks. And I like to think that I'm a link in that chain, that I'm providing just a bit of continuity. My own son is coming behind me, but sadly, now, my own son will be the last generation of Monkses to be reared in this house, because progress has decided that we're going to be developed into a landfill site. And a very traumatic year or two lie ahead of us, thinking of this old home, this link with the past being demolished. I certainly do not want to be here when that takes place. I'm going to do all in my power to ensure that it doesn't take place in the beginning, but if it becomes inevitable that this site is going to be used for landfill, we have to realise that Monkses of the Nevet will be no more. This is to commemorate not alone the building and the changing, but the archaeological dig that was done here over the last couple of years to make us acquainted with the wealth of history that's attached to this little part of the world. Stephen Johnston and his team spent a long time up here under canvas, under cloudy skies, digging for very interesting results.
If I give this a tug.
This poem was written especially for the Lusk Heritage Group for the unveiling of the commemorative stone on the new Rathmore Road, Lusk, written by local artist Leo Dunn, entitled Buried Treasure. For most a treasure is a find of riches such as gold or coin or precious stones that shall be mine. But buried treasure can be more, enriching knowledge of before, the past and whence we came and lived. And as we build our future way, by chance unearth a former path, returning to that distant past of which we can but wonder. But glimpses of our origins are treasures, rare and rich, to last, recorded for a future time, when some may wonder who we were and whence they came. And so we'll mark this precious find with name and stone for future time, so others may discover that we too did come this way one time.